welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the counselor's office. I'm Mr. Gaming Counselor, and we are back with some more Destiny 2 reacts from the counselor himself. I've been on a kick right now because I have a lot of things on my bookmarks saved. Listen, I hate Twitter, but at the same time, it's a great way to get content and see what people are talking about. And this video has kind of popped up on my timeline. Not a lot like some of the other videos I've done, but what caught my attention was it's called Black Armory is not as good as you remember Destiny 2 by the Wormkeeper. Now, I don't know who he is. He's got 1,000 subs. Kudos to you. I'm slowly making my way up there. But in my review for the Season of the Wish, I talk about Black Armory and how Black Armory, the Reckoning, or the season of the, was it the Rogue? God, I don't remember. The season of the Drifter, essentially. And then the Menagerie, that season. Those two seasons were like the first annual season pass, and they're probably one of the best seasons we've ever had, or group of seasons we've ever had. And so I'm very interested to see what he has to say about Black Armory, because I have some fond thoughts about Black Armory, especially compared to this season. I think Black Armory is much better, but we shall see. Let's see what he has to say.
With another Hot Take Tuesday.
Ooh, Hot Take Tuesday.
I told you that older Destiny content, such as D1 and Forsaken and like Season of the Black Armory, I can't remember what the actual name of it was. Season of the Forge, there you go. Season of the Forge,
okay.
Actually not that great.
Ooh! Bold words, Cotton. I can see saying Seasons, but saying Forsaken. Woo! That's bold words.
It had the same issues that still plague Destiny. Now, I say this because so many people, when I talk to them, they, you know, about the glory days of Destiny 2.
I want to just make a preference. I think every season is going to have its issues. If Destiny in its base form is struggling in some way, it's not like having a new season is going to magically wave it away if it doesn't target the issue directly. Just going to say that.
Their response is, oh, Black Armory. Man, Black Armory was so good and so great.
It was.
We had things like
certain things
back then. We had things like the Reckoning, which was
a
fun event, which that's not what everybody says, but a lot of people bring up like Reckoning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, of course, talk about the weapons and armor from Black Armory, and,
which is phenomenal.
Like but I don't know if we played the same game, because as I say,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I played that game, so.
And I actually think about it and remember content from D1, especially from like Destiny 1 vanilla all the way up to the Taken King. Like
Destiny 1 was a hot mess. If you play, you actually play. If you were to go play it right now, the story is so fragmented. Like the main one is supposed to be about the Black Garden, but then you have the story of the Hive, and then you've got the Fallen story. It is all over the place, and it's not as fun as you think it is.
We had some major issues back then, and so many people again think back on it, and there's a nostalgia factor. It's like
absolutely
D1, like it was so good. You know, I got all kinds of cool stuff, and it was so much fun. Like
I think there's also just I think the way that D2 launched for some people as well really makes people remember the way that D1 launched. There was random roles. There was hidden, like nothing. Year 1, D2 was everyone gets a sticker. In D1, it was a free-for-all. I mean, literally the second week we got Galahorn, and the people that got Galahorn had the best rockets in the game for like a year. Or more than that. But essentially, it was mystery. It was like hype. There was things to chase. And so that's why people have those fond memories, because it was the first time of those experiences, which we don't have many of those first time experiences in Destiny 2 anymore.
I wish we had D1 stuff back. But did we forget like the content droughts? Did we forget, you know, how difficult the game was? I mean, did everybody just kind of forget how bad Destiny 1's?
I think so. That's another thing. Like for me, I don't remember. I didn't forget. Like sometimes you would have months with nothing to do with the game. And I will be honest. And this is going to be controversial. It's Hot Take Tuesday. I don't know if this is coming out on a Tuesday, but this is Hot Take Tuesday. I think it's better to have content drought and use all resources for new content than to have season after season of bare bones trash. I would rather energy being spent in the front or in the back, I mean, than in the front. Sure, we don't have a content drought, but the content we have is garbage. Like Season of the Wish is literally reused assets.
Launch was like, I would argue the only thing worse than Destiny 1's launch was Destiny 2's launch, which was also horrible.
True.
But everybody seems to have this, this notion of like, oh, like
at least Destiny 2's story was the campaign, the story was fine. I think we can all agree that we liked, for the most part, the story, the flow was fine. Nothing about the base story itself was bad. In fact, I think if people had the campaign brought back, like remastered, people would enjoy it with how the game is now, like the gunplay. I think it'd be really cool to go and fight Gaul with darkness powers, especially when he uses light supers. That would be really freaking cool.
It's all perfect and things were so good and I wish we could get this content back, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is the content was nothing really that special in the grand scheme of things. Now, I think the reason
he is right. I think the content that people would enjoy is PvP maps and 100% strikes. Destiny 1 has some of the best strikes we've ever had. And especially like some of the Rise of Iron strikes were really fun, really challenging. I would love to see those strikes. And we have like the moon. So why can't some of those moon strikes come back? Like was it the bottomless pit? Is that one of the strikes? I'm trying to remember. Why can't we have that? Why can't we have some of these strikes come back remastered? Like just the basics of some of these strikes coming back into Destiny 2. I don't see why that would be a problem, especially to add more for GMs in the back.
Why so many people look back at especially Black Armory, and I'm going to use Black Armory as kind of my poster child here because I say Black Armory and I know a lot of y'all are already like, yeah, good old days, like, oh, I miss those days. How many of y'all actually enjoyed doing the Forge? I'll wait for an answer because
that's a good question. I think the first time you did each one to unlock it, when the story was tied to it, I think it was all right. I get what he's saying because it wasn't the most exciting. You just picked up a ball, tossed the ball, killed the boss. So I'm interested to see what he has to say specifically, and I'll add more into my opinion on it.
Here's the reality. The Forge was waves of enemies spawn, you kill them, and you throw things at the Forge in the middle. That was literally all it was. Like, we didn't have any other mechanics. Like, and so many people, they're talking about, oh, like Season of the Forge, it was so good, it was so fun, but like the activity was repetitive and it was boring. I did not like 100% that activity. It was.
So I disagree on the grind. It was boring, but it was very simple. It was simple. It was consistent. And if you wanted to speed run it, you could. And why does that matter? Because you could focus. You got to choose what reward you got. And so if the reward is worth it, then it doesn't matter. Oh, there goes the ice cream truck. Even they're stopping by to drop off rewards for people. The reward, if the reward is worth it, then it doesn't matter how repetitive or boring something is. I know that's a hot take, but the reality is, how many games do we play? Someone slammed the door next door and I could hear it rumble my door. It's really weird. How many people play a game like RuneScape, right? A lot of people aren't going to find standing by a tree, chopping a tree as fun. Where some people, they get into it because they're chopping that tree. They're selling some wood, like the magical trees, to sell it to get money. And so they're invested. They're working on their stats. That is fun for them, right? But when they do it, they know exactly what they're getting out of it. And so the reward is knowing that they're getting money. They're going to be able to use that money to buy better gear, to buy rare things, to buy other things to upgrade other parts of their stats. So the reward is worth it, even though the content itself, chopping a tree, isn't the most exhilarating, but the value composition is there. And the same thing with forges. The value composition was there for a lot of people. That's why people have fond memories, because they remember, yes, it may have been boring, but they remembered that they could speed run the thing, they could bake the boss, and they immediately got their gun. They immediately got what they wanted, and they could farm and farm and farm and farm. They could quickly farm to get that perfect god roll weapon. And the weapons at this time, you've got to think back in the time. Now the expectations, obviously, perks have grown, power creep, except for the hand cannon, like the Orchid, right? Isn't it the Orchid? How many guns have both kill clip and rampage? Not very many, right? If any at all. I don't think any gun currently has that combination, except for maybe, I think, the scout rifle from Last Wish. But it's a rare combination you don't see. And so you have to think about the value composition of that time. That was crazy. Those combinations were crazy. So you're like, yes, it's worth it because I could farm it. So I think he's right, but he's also dismissing why people like doing them, because you can do them fast, you can be efficient, and you can get exactly what you wanted. Because you got to think, back then, there was no real way to focus loot. There was no real way to focus and get the exact weapon that you wanted. And if I wanted that God Roll Orchid, I wanted that Takara's Gaze with kill clip to one-shot people in the body, I could get that if I farm specifically this pattern and do this activity. I could get that because I knew at the end of it, I would get a drop. Which for Destiny 2, back in the day, and Destiny in general, it was a big deal. Has been a way to really focus weapons like that, at least that I remember.
It wasn't fun. Say something like the coil, for example, where you have multiple different paths, and each path has different stuff that you have to do. You know, kill these enemies, or do this task, or do that task. And of course, in Destiny, like, you know, nothing is ever going to be perfect. Obviously,
no.
You know, it's still going to get repetitive.
I'm going to say that I 100% agree with him in this statement that the coil, and I even said it in my review of Season of the Wish, the only thing that holds up Season of the Reused Assets is the coil. If you took away the coil, it would be a scam, in my opinion. The coil is the best seasonal activity I think we've ever had. I think it is better than the Menagerie by none. It is a fantastic. It's just people are so jaded and there's so much trash in the season that it's covered. It's being covered by all that trash. And so the coil doesn't get as much love or attention that it deserves. And it's also sad that it's at the end of this year's life cycle. It should have been in the Defiance, in my opinion. The Season of Defiance should have been this. And I don't know. I just feel like the coil is not going to be appreciated to the level it would have been if people weren't so jaded.
Doing the coil, it's still going to get repetitive doing something like Dares of Eternity.
Absolutely.
All of these things get repetitive, but at least there's more variability in things like the coil.
And again, I think there's variability in each forge. You could choose the forge you want to farm, and you could focus specifically the weapon you want. Now, you can kind of do that in the coil if you get lucky and the chest pops up with the gun that you want. But the forges were the best way to focus seasonal weapons. There has not been anything better than that, in my opinion, that you could focus. Maybe Season of the Dawn, I think. Maybe the Season of the Dawn had that option. I don't remember specifics. I think Season of the Dawn, you could focus the weapons you want. It's been so long since I've done that season. But Forges, for its time, for Destiny, for the first time, it was the real first time you could focus stuff. And so that's why people hype up Season of the Forge, because it was innovative, which seasons nowadays are not innovative.
When it came to the forges, I mean, you literally killed enemies, threw a ball at the forge thing, and that was it for like 7 minutes. And then you finished.
And you got your gun in 7 minutes.
Wasn't really fun. I think the other thing that people hold on to is the weapons.
Uh-oh.
Because we got cool weapon rolls. You know, you can get
Absolutely
Kindled Orchid with Rampage and Kill Clip, which was, don't get me wrong, like that was awesome. But at the same time, like we're at a point now where we have weapons that do that. I mean,
do we? Let's see. Destiny 2 weapons with Kill, Clip, and Rampage together. This is a year ago. Let's see. Kindle Orchid. So this is the role that you would want. To my knowledge, the only weapon is the Scout Transfiguration from Last Wish. We can get both perks in the same role. The Fusion for Last Wish can roll that as well. So there's only 2 guns currently in the game that aren't sunsetted that can get this roll. So he's mistaken that this roll right here, no, there's only 2 guns, and one's a Scout, one's a Fusion. So no, you're wrong.
Chattering Bone, for example.
Oh, Chattering Bone. There's another one, but that's not a hand cannon.
Kill Clip, you can get that roll on it.
Okay.
Nobody talks about Chattering Bone
because it's a 540 pulse rifle. It's a 540 pulse rifle.
You know, you can sorry.
That was also, I believe, a 140 hand cannon, which is probably one of the most popular archetypes. Or 450s are not the most popular pulse rifle archetype. Let's be honest. It's not. Popularity has a big part to play. That's why 150s are also not the most popular scout rifles. That's why people aren't like going nuts about Last Wish having a craftable Kill Clip Rampage.
You can get some really interesting, really fun rolls on a variety of weapons.
Yes, this is true.
People just forgot that these weapons exist. Like, oh man, I just want my Kindled Orchid back. Why do you want your Kindled Orchid back? Was it because
it's the only 140 hand cannon with Kill Clip Rampage? Also, it sounded good. It looked good. It felt good, both in PvE and PvP.
The stats, because the stats, if I'm not mistaken, were they were a little bit above average, but they were nowhere near the stats that some of our...
So here's another controversial thing. Stats doesn't mean everything about a gun. Like there's this, and maybe PvP players can say to it, and maybe even casuals, but when you use a gun, the feel and the sound of it, and then the model of it really can sell you on a gun. Even if it doesn't factually make sense. Like for instance, there's a lot of people like stat-wise, Fatebringer should be phenomenal, but the stats are great. But a lot of people will tell you that the feel of the gun just isn't as good in PvP. And again, you need to put on yes, there's this nostalgia glasses, but you also have to put yourself in the context of the time. People remember this as a season where the base power of the weapons, like most, if not all the weapons, had good rolls. They were great. Look at this season. There's really nothing great about this season except for the scatter signal. There's really nothing that's great. Like everything else is replaceable by other loot in the game. But Season of the Forge, there was nothing else that could replace these weapons. These were amazing guns. They sounded good. They felt good. They looked good. And they had good perks. And let's be honest, if Bungie brought them forward, they would have new perk combinations. That's what they've done protypically with all old seeds, like undying weapons, even though they're not necessarily good. They have new perks, like Incandescent on the 390 pulse rifle. So let's not act like where the sunsetted weapons would never be good in today's standards because they would be pulled forward with more and different perks.
Our current hand cannons like Zhao Bane or Nation of Beasts have, right? And I think it's just that nostalgic factor.
And funny that he mentions Nations of Beast because Nations of Beast also got perk refreshes, which is exactly what the other weapons would get from Black Armory. They would get perk refreshes.
Back in the day, those were super awesome and super powerful. You got a Kindled Orchid with...
Yeah, exactly. So he does mention that.
In Season of the Forge, yeah, that was like the pinnacle of power because no
yes,
other weapon could roll with that trait combination.
And it still doesn't happen.
Fantastic. But here we are now in 2024, and
yes,
there are a bunch of very unique weapon rolls that you can get on, you know, a
yes,
variety of different weapons, raid weapons, dungeon
Uh-huh.
weapons, stuff like that. And so that nostalgic factor is really playing a part.
Again, if we're talking about them bringing back old content into the modern age, the Blind Well is a perfect example. It is old content. It came out during the Forsaken era, just like Seasons of the Forge did, but they pulled it forward, adding some new perks to it, to the guns. They would 100% just do refreshes on the weapons. And then they would either, depending on the perks, they would either be good, or they would be at the same as everyone else, or they would be God tier. I'm more on the line that I would expect them to be equivalent to other seasons, which it's a hit and miss whether they're good or not, but I don't think maybe one or two would be God tier. Like Scatter Signal is like the best fusion in that slot outside of Riptide. But for DPS, it's the best, which it's going to get hurt, nerfed because of Overflow being nerfed, which makes me sad. But the point is, they would get refreshes, so they wouldn't be bad compared, like old style. They'd be new, refreshed.
In Season of the Forge.
But he's right. We have so many variety now. Like, unless they went out of their way to make the Black Armory stand out, they may just get a perk refresh and they may not be good perks. So it'd be a good looking sounding gun, but then it would still be, it would be bad. Like Undying weapons, there's nothing really unique about them. Nothing that stands out that makes me really want to use them, but they are updated. So he's right, but he's also wrong.
Season of the Forge was not exempt.
It's very situational what Bungie would do with them.
It got boring. It got stale. You know, we already talked about the actual event itself being dull. Like all you did was throw a ball at the middle thing. That is what the event was, and killing enemies.
Yeah. There's more to it, and I'm gonna wait to the end to see if he mentions anything that I'm gonna say, because I don't want to continue stopping if he's going to actually say it.
Okay. That got old after a while. You know,
I mean, he's not wrong. Throwing balls is not the most entertaining, but it's the value composition.
And people just stopped doing it. People complained that it was getting old and it was getting boring. And of course,
exactly.
we knew that there was upcoming content, you know, that was coming to the game with Season 8, which was Season of Opulence.
And let's not forget that you had to do the opening quest for each fort on every character, and it was boring. After the first time, it was a grind. It sucked. Let's not forget that to unlock these forges was so bad.
So it wasn't necessarily as bad because we knew we were getting fresh content. Plus, it was just right as Bungie was transitioning into that seasonal model. So again, people were more excited about it. But Season of the Forge, I mean, it was a very in terms of the like content, you know, the playing the actual game, I would say it's very low on the scale. I would say it was very low. I would say that the following season of Opulence, had a much better gameplay structure, you know, with the menagerie, and even the menagerie wasn't perfect, but that's not for today's video. But Season of the Forge wasn't entertaining. The weapons, while they were special at the time, they are no longer special now. You can get these.
Well, I mean, he's right. They're not special now. But if they chose to pull them forward, whether they're special or not will be determined by Bungie. Like if they gave them good perk combinations, then it could could be very apparent that they are good. Again, they can be pulled forward with a perk refresh, and it's 100% determined on what Bungie gives them.
Same unique weapons on a variety of different, you know, weapons that are currently up to date. They haven't.
And you could honestly say that about any gun in this game. You could talk about this season. This season has nothing unique. I would say at least the way the Black Armory weapons look are more unique than the weapons that we got for this season look.
Been sunset or anything. And yeah, I think the last thing is, of course, the aesthetic, which granted, I will say the Black Armory aesthetic was absolutely fantastic.
They were great.
Aesthetic, you know, it had this
black and red was hot.
I want to say old school look to it, but it was like, I guess, more of like a modern, like a modern weapon look. You didn't have any.
It was futuristic to me, but
you know, one of the things that sticks out to me is like Season of what was it? Season of Plunder.
Oh God, yeah.
Pirate-looking weapons,
which is cool.
Season of or this current season has the not the dragon theme, but that fantasy themed weapons,
which are mid to me. But
Black Armory had what looked like modern age weapons, and a lot of people liked
kind of.
A lot of people liked that they had the angular look to it. Everything was nice and symmetric. There wasn't a lot of.
I think it's just because it looked clean and sleek, and it was black and red,
so to speak. And granted, like I said, I also enjoyed that aesthetic, but aesthetic alone should not carry how you feel about a season, because there's been plenty of seasons that have had wonderful aesthetics.
True.
Anyways,
he's not wrong.
That's
he's not wrong.
Say about that, of course. Like I said, Season of the Forge, if you think that it was the best season ever, that's your opinion. Like,
I don't think it was the best season. I think one of the best.
Feel that way, but I think that too many people forget about the bad, which is not a bad thing. I mean, that's not a bad thing at all. But when people refer to Destiny 1 and stuff, like,
I think there's definitely nostalgia. Oh yeah,
that was before we had the seasonal model. So you got your DLC. And once you got everything, that was it for the next 3 months. That wasn't fun. But of course, we all remember, oh man, you could solo Crota. That was a positive, because that was a lot of fun.
That was fun.
House of Wolves, the Prison of Elders, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, content drowns were notorious back in Destiny 1. So yeah, anyway.
My counter to that is also Bungie would also sunset previous content. Like, and they didn't sunset, right? They in-house sunset by power. Like, they did not allow older gear to go forward. You could continue to play that content. You could do all like Crota's End. You could do Vault of Glass. You could get Mythic Class. But all that expansion stuff did not carry forward in Light. So that's how they sunset it. Like, you could still play with it. You could still have it in the game, but you could not use it for the most up-to-date stuff. Like King's Fall, you could not use any of Vault of Glass stuff for. You couldn't use Vex. Could you use it in PvP? Yeah, PvP was all aboard, use whatever you want. But you couldn't do that with PvE, like any of the raids. So they in-house sunset stuff, and a lot of people hated that. And what they could have easily done during this drought was unlock the ability to farm the stuff and push it forward. Imagine that. I can farm Vault of Glass this season or in between, and it's now pulled forward. And guess what? In a couple seasons, they can make it in-house sunsetted. You can no longer use it for the next expansion. You have to use new stuff. And then when there's a drought there, you reintroduce it again. And so, yes, you're regrinding the same things again. But at least it makes you do the old content. It has a reason to do it. And people who actually care will care. And if you don't care about that, then you would just have the same thing of not doing anything for 3 months. So again, this is all by Bungie's design of what happens in between it.
Anyways, that being said, I want to hear your thoughts. Like I said, Season of the Forge and older Destiny content was not better than what we have now. You're just nostalgic.
Woo! So, he is right, but he's also wrong. Season of the Defiance, I would say I would rather do Forges than Season of Defiance. It was so boring. Deep dives. So freaking boring. And what's the difference between Forges and some of this content is that it's shorter. The Forges were shorter. It wasn't the most fun. But if you don't enjoy the seasonal content, period, I would rather have something that you could blitz through and get done in like 7 minutes versus spending 15, 10 minutes or whatever, right? And if the rewards have not been good in most of the seasons, whereas Season of the Forge during its time, the rewards were worth the time to do the activity, which may not have been boring. I'm going to be honest. He also is ignoring the fact that we had Niobe Labs, which granted isn't necessarily something you did all the time, but it was a challenge. It was a secret. I mean, I remember people spending all day, and it took Bungie giving hints to streamers on how to actually finish it. But it was crazy. It was something, it was like a mini raid event, which is something we don't get anymore. We don't get those anymore, mostly because the team that worked on it is not part of Bungie, and 2, because Bungie doesn't wants to cater to casuals and thinks we can't make anything ever challenging. And then, yes, that's an elite hat, but let's get it straight. There should 100% be things in games that people aspire to that not everyone can do. And let's be honest, I helped people who've never done it before, and they did it. And it's not like you couldn't do the content. It should be challenging. It should be wow. It should be crazy. But if you're not sold on Niobe Labs, let's talk about the fact that we also got a raid. He didn't mention that. Did we get a raid for Season of the Wish? No. Now, you could spend more money to buy a dungeon, but that's not part of the season. And is it a old raid brought forward? No, it is. See, we got a raid. Yes, it was short, but heck, it was still a pretty good raid. It was quick to get your loot. It was fun for the most part. It was cool. A season that had a new raid. A new one with new loot. Heck, we got a Sparrow that for years, up until maybe a couple months ago, was the best Sparrow in the game. And we're just now getting it to where other Sparrows matter. That's how iconic that season is. The loot and the things we got from that raid were literally iconic. So I think he's ignoring that aspect. Some of the... I'm not saying that the forges were the best. I think the reward composition is better than most of the trash we get now. The fact that we got a raid, a new raid, not a revisit raid, a brand new raid, and we also got a hidden mission. That's not something that is prototypical. So for the fact, and the biggest thing there is innovation. Most seasons do not have the same innovation as Season of the Forge or Season of the Drifter. Season of the Drifter had literally Reckoning, which was hard for most people, and they end up having to nerf it. But it also introduced Gambit Prime, which was innovative in the fact that we had actual armor sets with actual like perks built into them that actually impacted the mode and how you played. Which they do have raids, but it's very trivial. It doesn't matter. These were true sets that if you had them all together, you did some cool things. That was innovative. We don't do that anymore. Bungie doesn't do that anymore. So I think he's ignoring all these things of the past that Bungie doesn't do in the future. Seasons are just boring seasons. At least the seasons of the past did something. Season of the Forge actually did something. It set some expectations. So I agree with a lot of what he says, but I also think he dismisses the reason of why. Why do people remember Season of the Forge? Why do people remember the guns? Why do people use that as a template of what season should be versus what we have now? It's because of innovation, is because Bungie cared, and because the weapons were actually good. The reward composition was there. The time you spent was rewarded by the weapons you got, which was guaranteed what you wanted. The perks may have not been it, but you got exactly what you wanted. You got a raid, which was fun. Introduced Anarchy, which for the longest time was one of the best freaking grenade launchers in the game. Also, didn't we get Mountaintop during this time for PvP? Didn't we get Mountaintop during Season of the Forge, which was the best grenade launcher in both PvE and PvP? Like let's not get facts mixed here. There's a lot that's been not talked about in the context of the past. It is literally one of the best seasons. And if we were to pull it all forward, yes, the Forges would pale comparison compared to the Coil. But the time it takes, instead of spending 40 minutes and hoping that you get a red pattern for a gun that you want, you could spend 7 minutes, get exactly the gun you want in a Forge, and it's always going to be that gun because it's what you choose it to be. You can't get that guaranteed in most of the seasons nowadays unless you spend engrams to focus it. But imagine if we had that system plus the Season of the Forge combined. Imagine that you get a drop of what you want every time for 7 minutes, and you get engrams, and you can focus them for red borders. That would be nuts. And like I said, new raid. That's not heard of. It's usually brought back raids. Also, it's paid dungeons. Imagine you could pay for the dungeon or you got a free raid. I don't know. That's my hot take. Again, I agree, but I also disagree. He did say hot take Tuesday, so there's my hot counter take. I had some hot takes in there. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Again, link will be down below for you. You can't see it, but it's the Worm Keeper. Again, he's right. There's a lot of nostalgia berries for Destiny 1. I think he's 100% true on that. I think people forget how boring forges are, and unlocking them was so bad. But I think people would prefer the forges over what we get now, for the fact that what we really want is loot. It may not, a lot of the season content now is boring, and I don't play it. Like, I don't revisit any of the content this year, except for maybe the coil. Everything else this year has had garbage tier seasonal activities. I would rather farm forges for 7 minutes to play the rest of the trash that we got in the modern age. Just saying. Just saying, for the time spent, I would rather do boring forges than have to spend 10-15 minutes on boring activities. That's my hot take. Let me know what yours is down below. Until next time, don't forget to be the best version of yourself. And as always, game out.